the entire story of the Rakatan Infinite Empire. The Rakatan Infinite Empire, also known as simply the Rakatan Empire, was a domineering force in the galaxy, governed by the Rakata. Once the conquerors of the galaxy, the Rakatan were dreaded humanoids with amphibian-like features. This species existed before the Imperial era, tearing down worlds and enslaving every species they encountered. They were unstoppable, using the dark side of the Force to overpower their enemies. With hyperdrive technology at their disposal, they moved from planet to planet, unleashing and spreading their reign of brutality, cruelty, evil, and dominance. The Rakatan were a race of merciless warriors with no restraint in killing large groups of slaves. As carnivores by nature, they would consume the bodies of their conquered enemies and, at times, even the slain bodies of their own kind. Chapter 1. Origin Story. The Rakatan species were the inhabitants of the planet Lehon. They were known as builders. One day, a Force-sensitive species called Esh-Kha visited this remote tropical world of the builders through dimensional gateways, long before 36,453 BBY. These unique beings would play a significant role in bringing order and civilization to the Rakatan species, which would eventually lead to events forever etched in the story and history of the galaxy far, far away. Let's have a brief history of the species known as the Esh-Kha. They existed long before the pre-Republic era and are primarily known for their advanced technology and space travel, as well as for teaching the inhabitants of different planets about the Force. Right in Dathomir, their home planet, they built the Infinity Gates and Star Temples. The Infinity Gates allowed them travel across worlds. One other aspect of this exceptional travel technology is that it could be used as a superweapon, which leads us to its alternate name, the Infinity Wave. This technology was housed within the Star Temples, and they were structured within the Star Temples. The Star Temples also had a special role they played in making the Infinity Gates, or should I say Infinity Wave, functional. These pyramid-shaped buildings were designed to protect the Infinity Gates from intruders of any kind. Without the Star Temples, the Infinity Gates, when activated, could consume the planet on which they are housed, leaving nothing, including the moons, suns, and surrounding planets. The Esh-Kha's remarkable and advanced technology provided them with a significant advantage in the galaxy, allowing them to establish an empire known as the Esh-Kha Holdings. In this pre-Republic era, there were other renowned species that existed alongside the Esh-Kha. They include the Celestials, Sharu, Kalumi, Kilix, Tong, humans, and the Gree. The Gree in particular were not allies of the Esh-Kha, but rivals, as they had their own empire. Although both the Esh-Kha and the Gree were servants of the Celestials, the dominant galactic power of their era, they experienced territorial conflicts due to the waves of power emanating from the Esh-Kha's Infinity Gates. The cobalt blue-skinned Esh-Kha had already visited many other worlds before reaching Lehon. As they had done on those worlds, they became teachers and benefactors to the Rakatan, instructing them both by precept and example on how to use the Force, and providing them access to their advanced technology. The Rakatan, being quick learners, eventually mastered the Force. However, the Esh-Kha would later discover that the race they were nurturing in the ways of the Force was also cannibalistic by nature. Not only did they have an appetite for their regular homeworld meals, but they also had a tendency to eat each other when survival was concerned. Chapter 2. The Rakatan Rebellion. Beyond their cannibalistic tendencies, the Rakatan blatantly ignored and despised the Esh-Kha's instructions on maintaining balance in the use of the Force. Sadly, they found the dark side of the Force more appealing. Their defiance shocked the Esh-Kha. The Rakatan were out of control, and all attempts by the Esh-Kha to curb or restrain them failed. Driven by their thirst for battle and domination, the Rakatan quickly began using the Esh-Kha's technology in their quest for conquest and war. The Rakatans, with their savage nature, began their attacks on planets far beyond Lehon. They focused on Force-rich worlds, seeking to conquer and enslave all residents within the planets. Their thirst for dominance kept growing with every victory, pushing them further to expand their reach. By developing self-aware machines powered by Force energies, the Rakatan became among the distinguished few to have such a technology in their time. This was not enough for their world domination plan, as they advanced to build biomechanical machines using the power of the dark side. They enslaved entire populations and brutally destroyed those who opposed them. Chapter 3. Emergence as World Conquerors. To add to their formidability, the Rakatan created a technology that allowed them to subject their opponents to fear. They had force power technology, which they used to conquer several other planets. Some of their force power devices included builder droids, planetary disruptor fields, and skip ships. These skip ships were starships equipped with deflector shields and beam weapons powered by crystals that focused the force. Also aboard their skip ships was the Rakatan hyperdrive, also known as the Force Drive because it relied on force-sensitive beings to function. Through the Force Drive, they could travel from world to world, but only to those with a strong force signature. Based on this, they established a prison facility on Belsavis that also utilized their teleportation technology. However, this teleportation device drew immense energy from hyperspace and had the potential to destroy an entire star system, along with the surrounding systems. To fuel the force drive aboard their skip ships, the Rakatan used force-sensitive slave species. These warships contained vast rooms specifically designated for these slaves. The rooms were lined with storage containers arranged side by side, resembling tomb shells. The slaves were tightly restrained within these containers, with electrodes attached to them, making them living power sources for the force drive. Powering the force drive was no small task, and it required the subjugation of these species to extreme pain over prolonged periods, extracting the dark side energy within them. With over 500 force-rich worlds under their rule, the Rakatan Infinite Empire spanned vast interstellar systems, much larger than the empires that arose after their era. Some of the popular worlds they conquered and enslaved include Zo, Honoghr, Generis, Corellia, Hijarna, and Dantooine. They were wicked, aggressive, and unmerciful toward those they enslaved. Other species they enslaved through conquest included the Kumumga of Tatooine, the Selkath of Manaan, and the Wookiees of Kashyyyk. They transported all their slaves to new worlds and used humans from Coruscant and natives of the Corellian system to create huge and advanced weapons. On Megiddo, a planet inhabited by Lurmans, they had their slaves craft beautifully shaped crystals to commemorate their victory. While on Kashyyyk, the planet of the Wookiees, they installed a terraforming computer. This terraforming computer, also known as the Builder Forge, was designed to monitor the planet's agricultural reformation due to its inability to sustain significant levels of production. In 33,598 BBY, the Builder Forge lost contact with the Rakatan, and 200 years later it malfunctioned. The malfunction made the machine function beyond its intended lifespan, causing the Roshar trees on the planet to experience overgrowth, and other species evolved at an accelerated rate. On the Rakatan warships, or skip ships, slave species with strong wills sometimes could break free from their tomb shells. Apart from this, the Force Drive's reliance on the Force was its only limitation. The Rakatan were never satisfied with this, as it meant they could only conquer a few worlds, even though they had space-traveling technology. They wanted the Qua's Infinity Gate technology, and when their former benefactors refused, they turned on them, killing several of them. The Qua confronted the Rakatan on their homeworld, Lehan. They succeeded in disabling most of the remaining gates before fleeing back to Dathomir. However, it didn't end there. Years later, the Night Sisters, based on their beliefs, would state that the Infinity Gates destroyed by the Qua resulted in unnatural disruptions on Dathomir, summoning the Infinite Empire to the beloved homeworld of the Qua. Upon their arrival, the Rakatan went after the Qua, but the Qua had been transformed into an animal state by the spirits, who devolved them into simple-minded Qui lizards. The spirits were supernatural beings recognized by various force-sensitive individuals. These beings enabled the practice of magic, which could be accessed by tapping into their energy. The Night Sisters, who became the later inhabitants of Dathomir long after the battle between the Rakatan and the Qua, believed that the physical realm was not the only realm in the galaxy. They believed there was a parallel realm beyond the physical world inhabited by spirits. According to the Night Sisters' beliefs, the spirits were also governed by twin deities, the Winged Goddess and the Fanged God. Both were representations of the light and dark sides of the Force. Part of the spirits' abilities included granting fertility to the clans and claiming the souls of the dead. By 35,000 BBY, the Rakatan had spread themselves across various unknown regions in the Eastern Galaxy. They built a massive space station called the Star Forge over the Star Abo in their homeworld system. Drawing energy and matter from the Star Abo combined with the power of the dark side, they created numerous warships, droids, and other technological machines. The space station became their factory for various war materials. However, it was forged from the many lives taken from Force-sensitive beings. Starforge fed off and was fueled by their dark side emotions and traits. This extraordinarily large station was so big that capital ships could move right between the gap of its 3 fins. It was with these fins that energy and matter were drawn from Abo. The exterior of the Starforge lacked many defensive weapons. However, it possessed turbo laser batteries positioned at its hangar bays. The size of the ship itself was enough to protect the entire outer chamber, making it impervious to enemy attacks. It also had a ship-disabling energy field that caused approaching ships to malfunction and be drawn into Lehon's gravity well, causing them to crash. The Rakatan dominated Dathomir and transported a number of Rancors to Lehon. They brought one of the Rancors to the planet Gamor, an agrarian planet inhabited by a porcine sentient species. Among these species, the Rancor became a mythological creature in their culture. Not only did the Rakatan succeed in defeating their benefactors, but they also succeeded in defeating their rivals, the Gree. They drove the spacefaring species back to their home world. The Gree, who had always been rivals with the Qua, were a species of 6-tentacled cephalopods. This race also possessed hyperspace flight as part of their technology. As one of the oldest races of their time, they had a rule. Non-Gree were never allowed to immigrate to their planet. One of their technological achievements was developed through the process of material synthesis. In other words, the Gree would take simple elements or matter and reconfigure their nuclear structure. They had masters in the art of this process known as synthesors. Another intriguing aspect of their technology was that their machines had a musical quality. They emitted musical notes whenever they were operated. Based on the unique physiology of the Gree, their machines and devices were structured to be activated or operated with their 6 tentacles. The Gree also had 4 recognized professions on their planet: the crafters who built their machines, the researchers who designed new devices, the operators who manipulated and operated the machines, and the administrators who were in charge of the government. Despite all their uniqueness, the Gree could not withstand the revolt and wrath of the Rakatan. Belsavis, the Rakatan prison world, was designed for the confinement of warlords, monsters, and other powerful beings. They achieved this through their stasis technology, which they first used on their initial prisoner, the World Razor. The World Razor was referred to by many as the Destroyer of Worlds and Eater of Stars. For thousands of years, little was known about this being, though it was said that its fury could shatter the entire galaxy if it were ever released. In fact, the Rakatan prison on Belsavis was specifically created because of this mysterious being, which had a hunger to consume entire planets. Years later, an inscription in a tomb on Belsavis revealed that it took nearly the entire fleet of the Infinite Empire to overpower this vile beast. Chapter 4. The Plague, Esh-Kha. While relishing and basking in their victory over many worlds and their rise as one of the most feared beings in the galaxy, the Rakatan were taken by surprise by a horde of aliens. These aliens became their dreaded foes, arch-nemeses, a thorn in their flesh, a plague within their empire. They were called the Esh-Kha. The Esh-Kha were a species with a unique culture and tradition. They had a hive-like society. These gray-skinned humanoid beings were bred and nurtured for specific roles, but were also allowed to have their own opinions and aspirations. Their hierarchical society comprised force-sensitive, simple-minded savants, combat-efficient warriors, and patriarchs who acted as leaders, providing counsel and wisdom to the Esh-Kha people. As a people with their own perspective on life and a distinct system as an independent nation, not under the supervision or tutelage of any higher beings, the Esh-Kha had the freedom to shape their lives and customs as they saw fit. Part of the Esh-Kha culture was that their names were earned based on specific actions, and they were received like awards for success or something highly significant. Some of the names obtained among them included Razor Mind, Deadly Cutter, Water Thinker, and Swift Blade. For instance, the names Razor Mind and Water Thinker were accorded to those who demonstrated unique shrewd characteristics. Those who were exceptionally effective in battle were given the names Swift Blade or Deadly Cutter. This made the young among them highly competitive and ambitious about earning a well-deserved name among their people. It was rare for the Esh-Kha to battle each other, except in extreme and peculiar circumstances. As a result of their clustered, hive-like nature, they only cared about their own kind and resented other sentient species. Hence, to outsiders and those who did not belong to their race, they were ferocious, wild, and merciless. They had no interest in associating with species from other planets, except to rain their wrath upon them. The Esh-Kha even had control over the World Razor, which helped them dominate almost half of the galaxy. With their status as one of the most feared species in the galaxy, they spread fear and destruction in every path or system they crossed. They brought many races close to extinction with their widespread rage, and upon conquering various species, they would expand and settle on their planets. The more they expanded their dwellings, the more their population grew. The Esh-Kha, with their hierarchical system, usually had one patriarch leader, but with their increasing numbers, a second leader arose by the name of Hollow Voice. Hollow Voice earned his position among his people by expressing a foreign perspective on coexisting with other sentient beings. He presented a peaceful approach to life, which resonated with the thinking and philosophy of his race. This made Hollow Voice a distinct name among his kin, resulting in an agreement to split the population into two: those who were subjects of the original and reigning patriarch, and those who belonged to the way of Hollow Voice. Those who were followers of Hollow Voice became a different Esh-Kha horde, settling on other worlds and welcoming nearby cultures around them. Regardless of this slight change or small drift in the custom of the Esh-Kha, the other horde of Esh-Kha did not stop at their spree of violence and thirst to dominate other worlds and species. This would eventually bring them face to face with the savage Rakatan, as their unrestrained and destructive manner of life caused them to destroy numerous slave worlds owned and governed by the Rakatan Infinite Empire. It was at this time the Esh-Kha gained the name The Plague among the Rakatan. The Rakatan wasted no time in exacting their revenge, bringing brutal and blood-curdling destruction upon the Esh-Kha. With their military force and fierce battle, the Rakatan shook the galaxy and almost brought the Esh-Kha to extinction. It was within this battle that they combined their strengths to overpower the world raiser of their disruptive opponents. All that was left of the Esh-Kha people were 100,000 survivors. Hollow Voice's people were not exempt from this harsh and savage war, but the Rakatan would only hear his plea to spare his people until they found a way to contain all the remnants of the Plague Nation. They eventually imprisoned the Esh-Kha, including the peace-loving Hollow Voice and his followers, in a state of stasis on Belsavis as punishment for daring to think they could be challenged. As this was a great victory for the Rakatan over their once threatening foes, they built a monument on the planet Hoth, featuring an interactive hologram that would speak of their triumph over the Esh-Kha. It would also serve as a permanent reminder to anyone in the galaxy that the Infinite Empire was not to be messed with. Chapter 5. Confronting the Sith, the Rakatan Invasion. Around 27,700 BBY, driven by their insatiable quest for dominance and expansion, the Rakatan arrived on Korriban, a planet in the Outer Rim also known as Moraband and Horusar. Korriban was the original homeworld of the Sith species and lay within the Horusset system, located in the Stygian Caldera region, also known as Sith Space, and it possessed 7 moons and 2 asteroid belts. The Sith species, also known as the Red Sith or Sith Purebloods, were red-skinned humanoids. The elderly among them had crimson-colored skin, while the infants had a lighter shade of red. They were known for having a larger number of Force-sensitive individuals, many of whom exceptionally strong with the Force. This strength was what led to the symbiotic relationship they forged with the dark side of the Force. Other beings on the planet were also sustained by the dark side, while they, in turn, empowered it. At the time of the Rakatan's arrival, the Sith were led by the Warlord Addis. Warlord Addis was their king, having ruled his people for over 200 years. A master of Sith magic, he was praised by the Sith as the Sithari, or Overlord, as they believed he was invincible and would reign for eternity. He possessed an intimidating stature compared to others in his race, with skin as dark as charcoal, and was clad in ebon armor. From his youth, the fearsome Sithari was marked and raised as the chosen one of Korriban. Armed with his massive battle axe, he led a series of brutal conflicts among his own people to unite all the independent tribes of Korriban. His success in this venture made him the undisputed leader and king of the Sith. The Rakatan, hiding their true motives, pretended to seek an alliance with the great Warlord Addis. They showed him how to use a holocron, guiding him on how to record his essence, all in an effort to gain his trust. King Addis in turn used their technology to create his own holocron, which became known as the Sith Holocron. However, the king was no fool. He quickly saw through the Rakatan's deception and recognized their intention to dominate and conquer Korriban. Swiftly, Warlord Addis gathered his army and led them against the Rakatan soldiers. Chanting the name of their king, Sithari, 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 the Sith army clashed with the Rakatan, killing dozens and driving them off Korriban. King Addis also secured Rakatan's starships, using them to protect and defend other Sith planets such as Tund, Ziost, and Malachor V. But as the battle raged on, and despite his victory over the Rakatan, King Addis was betrayed by one of his own, a male Sith named Esh-Kha. The Overlord's life came to a tragic end in battle, even though he had already defeated the Rakatan. The chaos and destruction wrought by the battle on Korriban faced the Sith species to retreat to Ziost. It was during this period that a splinter cult composed of Sith priests, also known as the Sorcerers of Tund, was formed. The battle between the Rakatan and the Sith led them to open themselves more to the dark side. As they engaged in constant communication with certain Rakatan species, they became convinced that all sentient species were Force-empowered. A Rakatan named Soa decided to form his own empire shortly after the battle on Korriban, creating an infernal council of Sith purebloods whom he enslaved and made to serve him. Among the Infernal Council were Esh-Kha, the betrayer of Addis, and Raspir, King Addis's court magician, but they were later imprisoned by the Rakatan in Eternity Vault on Belsavis. Chapter 6. The Jedi, the Ancient Defenders of Balance. The hunt for Force-sensitive beings did not cease with the Rakatan. They continued developing newer and better ways to locate planets rich in the Force. One effective tactic they developed was the training of the Force Hounds. Force Hounds were Force-sensitive servants of the Rakatan. Their primary function was to seek out planets strong in the Force. The method they used to achieve this was to cast their minds outside their bodies, allowing them to scout planets without restraint. These Force-sensitive Rakatan slaves were often made to face each other in survival battles, fighting to the death, with only the strongest emerging as the victor. Two renowned Force Hounds of the Rakatan were Trill and Zesh. Once friends, the two became rivals after being pitted against each other. Zesh, standing as the champion, spared Trill by giving her as a gift to her soon-to-be master, a gesture she saw as an insult. Trill was a humanoid slave whose master was Praetor Skalnas. Zesh, who later adopted the name Tau, was a human male slave whose master was Praetor Tulkar. In Arabesh writing, Force Hounds had their names inscribed on their faces and other parts of their bodies so they could be identified if they were ever dismembered. At one point, Trill detected a planet rich in the Force, but located in the deep core, and claimed she was unable to reach it due to hyperspace disturbances. Zesh, regarded as one of the best Force Hounds in the Rakatan Infinite Empire, dismissed Trill's excuse as a sign of incompetence, provoking her to attack him. However, it was futile, as Zesh pinned her to the ground, ready to strike. Just then, her master Skalnas separated the two with the Force. Using a mind rack, a device for locating Force-rich worlds, Zesh discovered the Jedi homeworld, Tython, and without hesitation, was sent to scout the planet with his master Tulkar. The Jedi were members of the Jedi Order, an organization of Force users united by a common belief about the Force. They were the inhabitants of Tython, a planet located in the galaxy's deep core, and their primary focus was maintaining balance in the Force. According to their beliefs, the light side of the Force was called Ashla, while the dark side was known as Bogan. Above Tython, two moons represented these opposing sides of the Force. Those among the Jedi who became too consumed by either the light or dark side were immediately exiled to meditate on the Ashla or Bogan moon, in hopes of returning to balance. On Tython, there were 9 Jedi Temple Masters, each in charge of one of the 9 temples. These temples were designed to help the Jedi hone their skills, and it was required that they move through all 9. However, the order of things would change with the arrival of a Force Hound on the Jedi homeworld. Zesh's master, Tulkar, urged him to scout the planet using Force Shadow aboard a ship, called the Devourer. Without intending to, Zesh appeared to 5 Jedi journeyers in a vision. These included Seknos Wrath, Shea Koda, Tasha Rio, Dagan Locke, and Lenori Brock. Jedi journeyers were Jedi who had completed their Padawan training and were now tasked with the mission of traveling to all 9 temples of the Jedi Order. Behind the mission given to Zesh and his master was Skalnas, who wanted to reverse the gradual loss of control the Rakatan species had begun to experience over Force by acquiring the Infinity Gate on Tython. However, it was during this mission that Zesh turned on his master and attacked the entire crew aboard, taking an escape pod. 3 of the Jedi journeyers he had appeared to in a vision were immediately drawn to the crashed ship. As Zesh exited his pod, he came face to face with the Jedi journeyers from his vision, who were astonished to find a weapon they had never seen, a Force Saber. The journeyers tried to convince Zesh that they meant no harm, but he doubted their intentions and attacked each one of them. The fight ended with Zesh fleeing, wounded and unconscious, lying within a rift known as the Abyss of Ra. Zesh's dark presence, however, caused a massive storm on the planet, signifying a shift in the balance of the Force. The Forced Hound Zesh would later be saved by the Journeyers from a riftworm called the Sarl, and would later join them to finish off the reptilian creature. A Force storm hovers around Zesh, continuing to grow larger, causing more imbalance on the planet. He still refuses to surrender, but is later knocked down by a Jedi Temple Master. Thinking it is the end for him, one of the Jedi Journeyers, Rakata, grabs his Force saber to execute him. However, the strange idea of honor confuses her as he urges her to take a portion of his body in recognition of her bravery. Kota turns off the weapon and Zesh is taken to the Jedi Temple of Healing, where a healer attends to his wounds. Zesh would later be exiled to Bogan to regain his balance with the Force, which leads to a series of events in which he embraces the light side of the Force, finds balance, and ultimately becomes a Jedi. Later on, Skalnes, Zesh's former overlord, returned and reclaimed Zesh's allegiance to the Rakatan Empire. In fear, the Force Hound began to serve Skalnes, feeling that he would never be fully accepted by the Jedi. With Skalnes' unending quest to restore his people's control over the Force, he and Zesh approached the Infinity Gate on Tython, as the Rakatan Flesh Raider soldiers fought against the Jedi Order. Rakata, with whom Zesh shared a bond in the Jedi Order, along with Dagan Lok, who led the Jedi into battle, decided to stop Zesh and his master. The Thor-Yor, the 8 great octahedron-shaped ships that carried and bore the Force-sensitive ancestors of the Jedi Order to Tython, appeared and destroyed the gates. Zesh would eventually kill his master in an attempt to defend Shay, casting aside his former identity as Zesh the Force Hound and embracing his new identity as Tau, a free man. This act would end the war between the Jedi and the Rakatan Infinite Empire, with the Jedi claiming victory over their nefarious foes. Chapter 7, 25,200 BBY, The Cataclysmic Fall of the Rakatan Empire. As the clouds of war began to dissipate over the Rakatan Infinite Empire, the aftermath of the conflict led to the decline of the savage species, causing different groups among them to fight against one another. All the internal strife within the Rakatan during this period was a result of the corrupting influence of the Starforge. The Rakatan grew weaker due to past wars and the internal conflicts they waged against each other. The debilitating effects of the war were not the only challenges faced by the Rakatan. A lethal plague fell upon the Infinite Empire, spreading rapidly and claiming many lives. However, the enslaved species were unaffected by the plague, leading the Rakatan to suspect that the disease had originated from one of them. As more of their people continued to fall victim to the deadly effects of the disease, the Rakatan would face another plague, one that would affect what made them superior and masters over many sentient beings, their connection to the Force. The Rakatan scientists would later discover that their reduced sensitivity to the Force must have been caused by a strange mutation from the plague. This also affected their ability to control their own Force-based technology. Their slaves began to perceive that their masters had grown weak, as the Rakatan started relying on inferior technology. Many of the Rakatan's enslaved species began a large-scale rebellion, which spread to neighboring worlds controlled by their masters. The insurrection within these worlds ultimately led to the collapse of the Rakatan Infinite Empire. Chapter 8, The Aftermath, Survivors of the Rakatan Empire, Legacy, and Near Extinction. Numerous Rakatan fled to their homeworld, unable to control the uprising among their former slaves. Using a disruptor field to disable communications and navigational systems, they protected Lehon from incoming enemy ships. Originally intended to protect the Starforge, the field was now needed for their own defense, as they faced attacks from various enemies. Though hidden on their homeworld, the Rakatan descended into a barbaric state, fighting one another and trying to conquer their tribes to bring them under one warlord. These intertribal battles went on for years, with the once powerful Rakatan species seeking to overthrow each other. A large number of the Rakatan, in the heat of the battle, fled underground, resurfacing years later as the Black Rakata. Those who remained on the surface were called the Red Rakata, the Elder Tribe, descendants of the priest caste who were protected by their ancient temples. Within the records of many of the worlds enslaved by Rakatan, the history of the once fearsome beings was completely erased. Some of the Rakatan tribes salvaged whatever they could from the storehouses of the Starforge, then fled due to another ongoing war. Those who fled settled in a different area of space called the Rakatan archipelago, which consisted of various planets. At some point, a group of Rakatan in the prison world of Belsavis created what they called a mother machine, an artificial intelligence designed to recreate their lost Rakatan force sensitivity, but this eventually failed. Another group of Rakatan tried reverse engineering their ancient hyperdrive technology, but this too did not yield the expected results. With a desire to close all chapters of the Rakatan Infinite Empire, the Elder Tribe sought the help of a force-sensitive human male regarded as the Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Revan. Through his force powers, he gained access to their Starforge, but ultimately went against the original plan, using their technology for a military invasion. However, he later turned from this betrayal, deactivating the planet's disruptor field so the Starforge could be destroyed by the Republic fleet. Revan also attempted to help the Rakatan regain their force sensitivity and rejoin the galactic community, but over time, the Rakatan on the planet Lehan slowly depopulated, died, and became extinct. Those in the Rakatan archipelago became the only survivors of their species, leaving many in the galaxy wondering if the Rakatan ever truly ruled hundreds of worlds long ago. 3 centuries later, in a bid to find relics related to the Rakatan Infinite Empire, a team of Churka Corporation archaeologists recovered the mind prison of the Imprisoned One, a Rakatan whose quest for personal power led to his people imprisoning his consciousness. He was accidentally released and tried to begin a new Infinite Empire, but was ultimately defeated. The Eternity Vault of the Rakatan during a battle on Belsavis led to the release of the Infernal One, Soa. Hollow Voice and his followers, as well as the Esh-Kha placed in stasis by the Rakatan, were also released during this period. Many years later, professors in the fields of planetary archaeology and xenoanthropology found the story of the Rakatan intriguing, making it one of the most important subjects to study and research, with only a few ruins of their civilization still in existence. The story of the Rakatan Infinite Empire eventually became one etched forever in the history of the galaxy far, far away.